Space, the final frontier.
Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is a very special video because I'm wearing a Star Trek shirt, which you can probably imagine doesn't come out very often. I bought this for a video that we were doing for a Bemis promotional thing, and we didn't even use it in the end. But anyway, I wanted to announce my involvement, my co-hosting of Trek Book 2023. So Trek Book 2023 is the third year that the Trek Book event has happened on BookTube, and it's invented by Vin at Revenant Reads, and it's all about celebrating Star Trek fiction. And there is a couple of away missions, we call it, where there's extra things you can do, and I've probably stretched it a bit, but it's all about fiction, Star Trek fiction. So I have always loved Star Trek. I've done a few videos about Star Trek already. I did my top 10 original series episodes, my top 10 Next Generation ones, my top 20 DS9 ones, because DS9 is my favourite, and top 10 Voyager episodes. I was planning on doing my top 20 characters, and I was going to do something about, well, to be fair, the top 20 characters was going to encompass all of the iterations of Trek, because one of my favourite characters was in Discovery even, which gets a lot of hate, but I really like one of the characters in it. So yeah, I love Star Trek to pieces, and I thought it would be really cool to just go through a bunch of books. So I'm going to start with a bunch of books that I just have that are the non-fiction side of it, and I've lost a few along the way as well. So I've got a big old companion. I used to have loads of them, and I know because I wouldn't have got rid of it. I know I've got a book which is really cool called Star Trek Navigator. It's a really thin book. It's really, really good, and I don't know where that is. I couldn't find it. And I've already mentioned on the channel my book called The Quotable Star Trek, which is really good, but I couldn't find that either. But I wanted to do the video, so I wasn't going to look around the house forever, but I know that's around somewhere. But I'm going to talk about those books, and I'm going to talk about the fiction that I'm intending to read, and then I'll talk about the away missions. I think I'm probably stretching it a bit with the away missions, but we'll get there eventually. So just to start off, I'm going to talk about some of the books I've had over the years. So these are two very special books to me, and I've had these a long time. I've probably had them about 40 years, and that's the photo novels. So Trouble with Tribbles and Sit in the Edge of Forever. So Sit in the Edge of Forever, famously or infamously written by Harlan Ellison, and he didn't like the TV version, but he wouldn't, would he? Because he's Harlan Ellison. But yeah, Star Trek had some really interesting writers sometimes that were successful science fiction writers that wrote for the original series. The Next Generation series, and going forward, all the other ones since then tended to have like a team of writers that were exclusively Star Trek, or at least that was their main thing, and they weren't necessarily successful writers before that. So definitely the case that with the original series, there was like DC Fontana had a reputation before she wrote for Star Trek. There was Theodore Sturgeon, obviously a very famous science fiction writer, and David Gerald, who I'll mention in a minute, and Harlan Ellison, Robert Bloch wrote for Star Trek. So yeah, really. So sorry if you don't know, Robert Bloch wrote Psycho, really famous author. So he wrote for Star Trek as well, the original series. So yeah, Harlan Ellison wrote Sitting on the Edge of Forever, one of the most popular episodes. And The Trouble with Tribbles, that's definitely clearly one of the most popular episodes. And the really cool thing with these photo novels, they're literally the episode through these photographs from the episode. So it's literally like a photo novel, hence the name. So yeah, they're like, I don't know, they're a bit cute. It's a bit like nice. I don't know. I've got sentimental value for these. So anyway, I wanted to show you those. Also, I got into this thing as well where I was buying loads and loads of Virgin episode guides. Virgin, what are they called? Virgin, what was it? Well, Virgin episode guide. I had loads. I had a Doctor Who one. I had the 2 Babylon 5 ones, which I still have. The Frasier, even. The Star Trek ones. There's one on Buffy, but I didn't get that one. There's tons and tons of them, and they're really cool. And the new Trek program guide was the Next Generation and half of DS9s. It came out during the DS9 run, and I really like the episode guide. It puts it into different sections, so you get you get the plot, but then you get Data's jokes, dialogue triumphs, so little bits of dialogue, new life forms. So if there was a new life form in an episode, they talk about that. So it's a really nice book. So I really like this book, and I've had this long time. And then, well, I literally bought it as it came out. And then the Delta Quadrant is the one that's the same thing, but for Voyager. So, again, really cool. And so what they got here, they got behind-the-scenes information, a lack of continuity or continuity tidbits issues, stuff about physics, bloopers, stuff like that, highs and lows and a verdict. So, it's a really cool episode guide for the Voyager. And I used to have big companion books, so like big episode guides. So the Next Generation one I had, I wasn't really massively into this side of it, but I did have a technical manual of some of the ships. And like I said, I've got the quotable Star Trek somewhere, and I've got the Navigator one, which is really good, Star Trek Navigator. I can't remember who wrote it. It's 2 blokes that wrote it. Robert Altman, I think is one of them. Robert Altman is a director. It can't be Robert Altman. It's a name that's similar. Anyway, the one I have kept, and up until recently, I'd kept it in pristine condition, but it's clearly something happened to it while it was in the loft. I know exactly where it was before it was in the loft, and it was a much better place. Now it's a bit vulnerable because it's so massive and floppy. But my Deep Space Nine companion, it's a huge book, and I love this book. It's but yes, you can see I've got to amend it a bit. I've had something leaning on it for ages over the last 24 hours to try and get it a bit more better condition for this video. But clearly I still need to work on it so it can be back to a nice condition. But yes, it's a bit like that in a minute. But it's so good. It's got loads of information about the episodes and how they filmed it, and it's got, lots of information you want to see, So, Deep Space Nine companion, Cisco. Is he my favourite character? Don't know. You have to look out for the top 20 characters. It's a toss between him and Worf and Garak, which are actually all 3 in DS9, which is kind of a coincidence because I love all sorts of Star Trek. I really do genuinely love Star Trek so much, and I love the fact it keeps coming back in different ways. I love the fact it keeps getting reinvented. I love the new films, the Chris Pine films. I do think it's a shame that they screwed up the second one by... I don't think they needed to put Khan in it, but even when they put Khan in it, it's like, okay, a new version of Khan, that's fine. And then they were paraphrasing the Wrath of Khan dialogue, which was really silly, so that was a shame. But then it also, I think, made people really judgmental about the third one before they'd seen it, and I think the third one's really good. But anyway, maybe I'll talk about the films in a different video. So, Star Trek fiction. What am I going to read? So, I did a bit of research. And I found out that there was one particular trilogy that was massively recommended by some of the people on BookTube that have been recommending Star Trek fiction. So, there's some really good Star Trek obsessive channels on YouTube, and I watched some of those. So I'll go straight to it. The one trilogy that I kept hearing about, which I now have, is the Destiny trilogy. So Star Trek Destiny is 3 books. You've got Gods of Night with Dax there, which is cool. Ezri Dax. Jadzia Dax was such a fantastic character. Really controversial that they did what they did, but I think the Dax character as a whole, the symbiont, is really interesting. And then second one, Mere Mortals. David Mack apparently has done a fantastic job in bringing lots of different Star Trek worlds together. And then the third one, the Riker there, is Lost Souls. So This is apparently really, really good, the Star Trek Destiny series. So I'm definitely going to read these. Definitely going to read these in the summer, which is what this Trek book event covers. So it's all about reading Star Trek fiction. So those are definitely going to be read. I've got a few others here that I could read. So there's 2 original series books here and a DS9 one. So I would like to read a Next Generation based one, because you can do so much with Next Generation stuff. Because the thing with Next Generation developed the original series stuff so much. And I think that's partly because, it's got to be said, I think that's partly because Roddenberry wasn't quite as involved. He was involved at the beginning, but when people talk about the Roddenberry Star Trek, they always lump the first 4 series together. But the original series was his baby, and then the second one, he died like into the second series, I think it was, of Next Generation. So I think Rick Berman should be given a lot of credit for Next Generation and for DS9. Probably Voyager, but I think Voyager was more, there's a few other people that were more in charge of Voyager. But, you know, I don't really relate to the idea of calling the first 4 series the Roddenberry period, because he just wasn't involved for most of it. He sadly died, so they were able to go past some of the hang-ups and cliches that Roddenberry had. You know, it's quite funny when you see Gates McFadden talk about how the new stuff is different from Roddenberry, and it's like, well, yeah, she's saying that he wouldn't have even liked some of the stuff that they were doing now. So anyway, this is Roddenberry for definite, because it's the original series. So I've got double. That looks like a bit sort of Twilight Zone-y kind of doppelganger kind of plot, which looks interesting. And then how much for Just the Planet, which I think looks like a really cool, could be like a Mudd's Harry Mudd kind of character maybe that they're dealing with. I think there are some books about Harry Mudd, to be fair, but yeah, this looks like a bit of a wheeler dealer guy that's kind of mixing up the politics of the Klingons and the Federation. So that's kind of interesting. Again, I haven't paid too much attention to the authors, because I think I'd have to read a lot more to get well into which authors were writing what. But those are 2 potential ones. And then I've got another DS9 one here with Kieran Nerys on the front called Fearful Symmetry. And also, I've got this, which is awesome, Star Trek Log 2 by Alan Dean Foster. Alan Dean Foster, very famous novelisation expert. And this was where Alan Dean Foster novelised the animation series. I think that's what all of these logs were about, novelising those. And this was a gift from Dave Brzezinski, and really appreciate the gift. And there's a bunch of other stuff he gave me. I was going to do a separate video on those things, because some really interesting, unusual things that he sent me. But this was awesome. So as a Star Trek fan, can't wait to get into this, and it's something that I've been meaning to read. So Alan Dean Foster's Star Trek Log was also something I could read as well. And this is 3 stories. So we've got The Survivor, The Lorelei Signal, and The Infinite Vulcan. So I'll be looking forward to reading these as well. There's 2 side missions, 2 away missions, as Vin calls it. The first one is just reading some scientific books, so that'd be quite cool. So I was looking into that, and actually, to be fair, evolutionary science is included in that. And there was one book I wanted to read for the early part of the Historathon, which I didn't get to, which I could go back to, about evolution. But the other side mission, the other away mission, sorry, is books that are related to the people from Star Trek. So I think what he really means is like either stuff that the actors have written, possibly about Star Trek, the non-fiction side of it, or maybe they've written some Star Trek fiction. So obviously Shatner's written some and all that sort of stuff. That's probably what he means, but I'm going to stretch it a bit. Although this is definitely true for this one. This is interesting. This is a book that I found, which is written by Roxanne Dawson. So Roxanne Dawson is Blana Torres in Voyager. Fantastic character, and done brilliantly by Roxanne Dawson, and someone that I think would be nice to see more of, really. But yeah, she's written this book, which is, well, she's co-written it. First part of a trilogy, so clearly a sci-fi thing, could be interesting. I had this ready for last year, but didn't get to it, so I could read that. And then there are a couple of other things. I'm going to mention these things, which are not quite. I don't know if they fall into the remit of the other side mission, but I just think it'd be cool to mention them. So if you haven't read Red Shirts, definitely should read Red Shirts. John Scalzi uses the cliche of the red shirts, the people in the red shirt in the original series, always being the ones that were the expendable members of the crew, and he used that to create this really awesome comedy where they know that they don't want to be part of the away missions because they never come back, and it's just it develops really well. What a shame. I wanted this to be one take, just one take, no editing, and then my iPad ran out of space. Come on! So anyway, what I was going to say was the red shirts. Red shirts, yeah, it really plays with the conceit of these people on this starship, very similar to Star Trek. There's no mention of Star Trek. It's all like done with words that you can clearly say what it's. You can clearly tell what he's trying to say, but he doesn't go into the franchise's language. And they want to stay away from the away missions because they know what happens to red shirts and they don't come back and it ends up becoming quite meta at the end. It's really funny and interesting and clever the way he ends in an unexpected way. But definitely recommend it. If you haven't read it, definitely read it because it's brilliant. So Red Shirts is kind of Star Trek related because it's kind of a parody. And this is Night of the Living Trekkies. So this is a zombie book set at a Star Trek convention. So I read some reviews of this where I felt like they were probably expecting high art, something really, really complex and thought-provoking. It's called Night of the Living Trekkies. It's a bit of fun. It's worth reading if you can get hold of it. I quite enjoyed it. And it's just lots of people running around in Star Trek uniforms at a convention and trying to deal with zombies. So there's that. And just as one last comment on the video, this is stretching the second away mission loads. But I don't know, it might be quite nice to celebrate these people that have been involved in Trek that are behind the scenes, the writers. So what I'm thinking is, it's a nice excuse to mention David Gerald because he wrote Trouble with Tribbles, which is technically, arguably, one of the most popular episodes of all time. And they did a fantastic DS9 episode called Trials and Tribulations, where they went back. There was some reason why they had to go back to the original timeline, and Cisco and some of the other DS9 crew are mixing in with the original crew. It was so cool. It was an anniversary episode. It was lovely. But anyway, Trouble with Tribbles was written by David Gerald, and this book is so good. The Man Who Folded Himself. It's a time travel book with some really interesting ways that he explores time travel. So if you want to read that, that's definitely recommended by myself. And then there's a very respected author that was involved in the recent Picard series. So I think it was in the development stuff before they did season 1. I don't think he's actually written. He's like an executive producer, and he was kind of involved in the general concepts rather than writing an actual episode, I think. And I love the Picard series. I thought it was awesome. And I think it was really good the way they had like a data-centered first season that was really cool, and they explored lots of interesting things and had a new crew and all that sort of stuff. And Patrick Stewart did a good job leading the show despite being 200 years old. And then the second season with Q was really good, and like they messed around with the Borg and all that sort of stuff, and Borg and Q, clearly very popular kind of devices to use, and they had a really nice fitting ending. I'll tell you what, I've got to say, I don't know if I'll talk about this again, but I think it's such a shame that they brought Q back after having given him such a good ending at the end of season 2, because I think it was just a really nice finish to that season. There's just a sweet scene where he's like, Mon Capitan, time for me to go, sort of thing. It was just a lovely scene. One of the books I used to have, which I don't think I've got anymore, I actually saw John Delancey. I bought the book that he wrote. I can't remember what it was called even, Q something. And he was doing a signing, and I went and shook his hand, and he signed the copy of the book. But I don't know where that's gone. So that was another book I used to have. But anyway, Michael Chabon was involved in Picard. If you haven't seen season 3 of Picard, oh my god, it was so brilliant. But yeah, he wrote Wonder Boys, which I've seen the film. I really like the film, but I like to read it, and it's been long enough since I've seen the film for this to be pretty fresh for me as well. So I'd like to read that. And this is the most famous book, I think, by Michael Chabon, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. So it's a bit of a hefty one. I don't know if I'll get to it in this period, but I might do. And it might be quite nice, again, to celebrate the people that have been involved in Trek that aren't just the actors and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's what I decided to announce, my part of Trek Book 2023. I'll tell you about the other hosts. So Vin at Revenant Reads created the event and is obviously leading it a third time. But there's Steve Donahue, he's going to be doing lots of videos. There's Michael K. Vaughan, who I think has put up something today. So Michael K. Vaughan's also doing it. And Brandy from Booklectic is doing it. And she knows a lot about Star Trek fiction. So she's going to be quite knowledgeable about all that sort of stuff. She's done a lot of reading on Star Trek fiction. And Read by Fred from Read by Fred is also going to be hosting as well. So I'm really intrigued to see his response to the hundreds and hundreds of Star Trek fiction out there. Someone, one of the people that have done a BookTube YouTube video about Star Trek fiction, they kind of pointed to their shelves that were just stacked full of Star Trek fiction, and I think they said there was 800 books of Star Trek fiction out there. 800. So if that's the case, then we've clearly got a lot of choice. I would like to find something more modern. Apparently there's a really interesting and successful and well revered prequel book for the Picard series, The Last Best Hope, by Picard, The Last Best Hope is called, and apparently that's really good. So I'd like to get that. I've also got something on the way. What have I got on the way? I've got something coming from eBay as well. I was going to wait until that arrived before I did the video. I just forgot about that. I can't remember what that is. But anyway, you'll see that in the wrap up. What is that? Oh, I know what it is. It's another one that was recommended. It's a book. I think it's called New Frontier. It's a series of books that was a new crew that they wrote. I think Peter David wrote it. Peter David has got a very successful career in writing TV related stuff and comics and that. And this is a new crew, new story, and apparently it's fantastic. A lot of people say that. When you see people recommending Star Trek fiction, they always talk about this series. So the first book of that is on its way to me from eBay as well. So there we are. Enjoy Star Trek. Enjoy the videos. Please comment below if you like Star Trek and you like the idea of some of those things. And if you're intrigued by this one, because it's a really good book. And if you're intrigued by this one. And if you've read Red Shirts, because Red Shirts is so great. But yeah, to be honest, I should probably be asking your opinions about the Destiny series, because that's clearly going to be the biggest focus of my fiction reading over Trek Book 2023. So, thanks for watching. Live long. No, I won't say that. Probably everyone's going to say live long and prosper. I'm not going to say live long and prosper. What should I say? Make it so. Number one. Make it number one. Number one. Make.
Paint me a picture